It's like when you run into C.S. Lewis snobs, and they tell you that you can't understand the Chronicles of Narnia if you read them in the order of publishing, right? You know, I'm just telling you it's better to read the second book first. So do that. You know that C.S. Lewis didn't write them in the order of the events, right? No, because I'm the Narnia nerd in this room, aren't I? I'm the one guy. All right. You all right there, man?
Yeah.
Val get a little upset this morning? Why not? I didn't know she could reach that high. All right. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to be in 2 Kings 15 today. We got one more minute, but if you have your Bibles, there you can open up to 2 Kings 15. Remember that we are, when we're talking about the king of Israel, we're actually talking about Jeroboam the second, right? Not Jeroboam the first. Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Good morning, guys. Is the Jeroboam that we can't seem to get rid of. He's like a bad habit. Everybody does evil in the sight of the Lord, according to the sin of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. And how bad he was is recorded in this book that we don't have. But he's actually described two ways. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, but he did some good things. Imagine that. Some guy who did a bad thing also did a good thing. We need to allow people to do that in our lives, I think, especially in leadership. But very specifically, it's reaffirmed. This covenant is reaffirmed here. Right? The reason that Israel is not wiped off the face of the planet is because they are afflicted for God's purposes. It was reiterated that he did not blot out into a screen at the moment. But things were bad. There was nobody, no Aitzer to come and deliver the people. And so there was no distinction between bond or free, right? There's a point to which wealth helps you survive traumatic events, and then there's a point where it helps nobody, like having an absolute crap ton of digitized fiat currency won't save you from an actual famine, right? We're not used to thinking in terms of that, but you couldn't eat the gold coins before. You definitely can't eat digitized fiat currency. Federal Reserve notes that don't actually even exist, right? So it's not gonna save you. That's the idea. Bond or free. There was nobody that was gonna deliver you. And the Lord did not say at that time, even under such severe affliction, that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven. Even in their idolatry. This is a country, nation that was founded in idolatry. Come on up, Norma, you got the lucky seat. Don't you love that front row? Ernie, you may be in trouble, brother. You may be in trouble.
Oh.
All right, all right. Usually Pam gets that seat, but you'll see that they are planning on your arrival. But he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, the son of Joash. So a couple things, right, that we probably talked about a little bit is, of course, there are bad kings that do good things, right? Jeroboam the second, right? So just in general terms, right, we're still dispensational. Israel is Israel, the United States is not Israel. But can you dislike something about Donald Trump and still say he did good things? Yes. Can you say that you don't like Donald Trump and say that he's not trying to be king of the United States? If you're smart, you could say that. But we have 48% of the country that voted for something else a few times recently, you know, so we know that asking them to do what is smart, even in the interest of self-preservation of the nation, they're not dependable. But, so, because of his covenant, he actually said it earlier in this chapter, because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he let Israel stay in the land until now, which was, we puts a timestamp on the compilation of this book, because it seems to be prior to the exile of Israel that it was recorded. That's kind of an important thing. Dating things. Like you may not care yourself because you believe prophecy exists, right? You believe that God knows events before they happen. He declares events that are going to take place. He works all things together for the good of those who love him. Isn't that wonderful? Mm-hmm. You love Jesus, and God makes sure that your stupid stuff doesn't harm you at certain points, right? That's easy enough. God declared there's prophecy, but a lot of people don't think that prophecy exists, and one of the main tools that they use to say prophecy doesn't exist is to start playing fast and loose with the dates on the authorship of Old Testament books. And so they'll say, well, Isaiah couldn't have prophesied that because prophecy doesn't exist. So it must have been 3, or Lord knows how many people have been proposed. 3 is fairly common, 3 different authors of the book of Isaiah. Simply because prophecy doesn't exist and we have to explain that's not what we believe, right? Sometimes people get this confused. I'm telling you what dumb people believe. I'm telling you what ignorant people believe, people who are not able to understand. Same thing with Daniel. I have a book written by Dr. John Walvoord on my shelf. It's very old at this time, right? I was at Dallas in the last few years that John Walvoord had an office at Dallas Seminary. So I did meet him, but he had not been actively teaching for a number of years. And it's called Daniel in the Critic's Den. Because Daniel is so specific, right, that if you allow the prophecies that exist in Daniel, you can't even be a liberal. You can't even approach the text. Daniel's counting down days. I mean, he doesn't get down to minutes. He's like, this is going to happen. It's this many years, and we can calculate when he said the Messiah was cut off. That's the day Christ was crucified. I mean, like it's that close and amazing. Like, you know, when you tell somebody in El Paso this starts at 3, when do they show up? 6. So, you know, I mean, depending on what event it is, you know, and so you can't even predict when your neighbor is going to show up to your kid's birthday party to that sort of precision, right? Many times. It's just how it happens. I'm neurotically punctual. I offend people the other way. I show up 30 seconds before the start date, you know. People are like, what are you doing here? I'm helping now. At this point, I guess I'm helping. You don't need help anyway. So you can't even predict when your neighbor is going to come to a birthday party. Daniel's here laying it out, saying this is the day the Messiah, who you don't know his name, you don't know his face, you don't know his disciples, you don't know what kind of trouble he's going to cause or what kind of trouble he's going to get in, but he's going to die on this day, and he's going to be hung on a tree, he's going to be crucified by his own people. That's how close that is. So it does matter. The dating of these things matters. This was prophesied before the exile, about the exile. In a way, it's insinuated that they are going to be taken out of the land, but they weren't until the time of writing. They were still in the land. So he expanded the borders of Israel out to Damascus, which will make your friendly local Syrians very happy. That Damascus was considered the rightful possession of Israel in the Promised Land. There are other things you ought to tell your Muslim neighbor way before that Damascus is part of the Promised Land. Probably, but you probably ought to try to tell them about Jesus first. But that is warranted, right? So, in the 27th year, I think we are here now, of Jeroboam 2.0, right? Azariah, you know who Azariah is? We talked about this. Uzziah. Everybody knows who Uzziah is. Azariah is Uzziah. He is the son of Amaziah, king of Judah, became king. He is the anointed Davidic king who has a remnant, right, of Judah, as opposed to the northern kingdom that has always existed, was founded in and continued to exist in apostasy. He was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem, which is remarkable, huge, longer than the general tenure of a judge, of the best judges. Made possible by the fact that he was 16 years old. You run across people that ever celebrate their 70th anniversary? You wonder how that's even possible? Yeah. How many years have y'all been married?
No, close.
Close. Yeah. Well, it happens because people got married when they were in what we would consider junior high. Back in the day, a lot of them, they happen to live long enough, and have enough marriage, at least respect for their marriage, they do it. But it's amazing. You're not going to get a 52-year reign if you start in your 40s, probably, or 30s, or whatever. That happens. Anybody expecting King Charles to be king for 52 years? You shouldn't, because you're bad at math at that point, right? It's just not going to happen. But he becomes king at 16. His mother's name, Jechaliah of Jerusalem. He did what was right in the sight of Yahweh, according to all that his father Amaziah had done. Now, I just gave away my point. Now, Azariah, Uzziah, does right in the sight of Yahweh. What do you know about Uzziah?
He became a leper.
Well, how did he become a leper? Did he go do missionary work to a leper colony in the southern
No,
kingdom?
he went into the temple and
He acted outside of his anointed office. God doesn't smile on that. What happens when you're Moses' sister and you get too big for your, not britches, like they didn't wear britches, nobody wore britches. You get too big for your britches. What happens when you go to Aaron and Miriam, come to Moses and say, we also are priests. We serve before the Lord. Well, he can't strike the high priest of Israel with leprosy, but Miriam gets what? Leprosy. You actually challenge the authority of the Levitical priesthood, like the sons of Korah did. And various times has happened, you know, possibly that the earth opens up and swallows up your entire clan. Right, those sorts of things. Leprosy is completely and totally associated in a lot of these stories with rebellion, and Uzziah did that. However, he did what was right in the sight of Yahweh, according to all that his father Amaziah had done. Only the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrifice and burn incense on the high places. Yahweh struck the king so that he was a leper to the day of his death. He lived in a separate house. I think it's First Chronicles. Oh, I actually have this up. Hold on. Yeah, Second Chronicles 26. There's a little more detail that he ruled with. His son ruled as a regent for a separate number of years, but he was excluded as a leper from even entering the temple. He was excluded from the cultic worship, and that's the anointed Davidic king who Scripture records as having done what was right in the sight of Yahweh. So net positive for Judah compared to many of the kings that they had. You remember Amaziah got big for his britches also, right? This goes back to when and how you support Israel, right? Northern kingdom, is this a nice kingdom? Is it a good kingdom? Is it a righteous kingdom? No. But every single king that rules over Israel is given something of a contingent, conditional promise. If you walk in my ways and do what I tell you to do, your reign will be blessed. How can that be? Well, because God still considers those people to be his covenant people, even in abject apostasy. Even in abject apostasy that they were founded in, that they left in exile in. They left in apostasy, they were founded in apostasy, and yet God still considers them worthy of preservation, if not blessing, right? They're supposed to be kept alive. They have the right to expand their borders to the biblical ones. They have the right to defend themselves at any cost, in order to possess that land, because they are only in it because of God's good pleasure. And that is always the case, that the people who have the right to possess the promised land only occupy it because of God's good pleasure. So fast forward to today, how did 1948 happen? You can argue about the Balfour Declaration right after World War I. You can argue about the politics of the United Kingdom and the world. You can argue about World War II and the Holocaust and all the pragmatic things, but boil it down to the absolute concentrate of what God is doing in the world. They do not have possession of the land. They own the title to it. They don't take possession of it unless God puts them there. How did all the politics come about? In miraculous, astounding ways. How did they survive the first few months of the onslaught of war? I'm telling you, that's why we have what's called Israeli carry. Anybody in here know what Israeli carry is?
Carry, C-A-R-I.
Israeli carry. Specifically, the Israelis were trained from 1948 until the 90s how to carry their sidearm because they had crap weaponry, like absolute junk that was pieced together and was unreliable, and so they were taught to carry without one in the chamber. Now, we consider that a death sentence in the Second Amendment community. You have the rest of your life to chamber that round. But in their case, they were shooting each other in the foot, and themselves in the foot, and they weren't drop-safe weapons, they were ancient things that we take. You can go buy a $300 pistol down at Bass Pro that is drop safe. It's better than the Israeli commandos were carrying for decades. And so that's why we have it. They were not able, they did not have the equipment or the manpower to keep the land that they were granted in 1948. But they were, and you can go through and see miraculous deliverance from their enemies throughout their history. So it's a load of cheap chicken baloney to say that God doesn't want them in the land, because the only way they exercise sovereignty in the land is because of God's good pleasure. And that's always been the case. That's not new. Anyway, so here he is. Lord struck the king, so he's a leper to the day of his death. We know that story. He took over the role of the priest, and was struck with, because of his rebellion against God's given authority in that office. And all of his juicy bits about his life, the Jerry Springer parts, are recorded in this book we don't have, the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah. I just make that point because if you take that to be the Chronicles that you have and you go look for the Jerry Springer info, you know, you're not gonna find it, because you don't have that book. Yeah.
Josh, it's just a small thing, like, it
Yeah.
seems odd to me, like, the author, whoever wrote this, that he would just throw that sentence in there and
Yeah.
not elaborate.
Yeah, well, they had
What
it.
was the purpose? Oh,
They
okay.
had it. And so look, it's
Okay.
like when I go to my dissertation supervisor, and my dissertation supervisor says, you don't have enough room to do that.
Got it.
Put that in an appendix.
Okay.
And he's done that a lot. Right after he tells me my vocabulary is too much for him. So anyway, he's a good guy. Likes my writing. Hope he doesn't hear this. You know, same sort of thing. So you have a curated purpose, and that's been our intent. So remember that 2 Kings is the last of the former prophets in the Hebrew Bible. So what we say, right, the prophetic message of the former prophets is supposed to be authoritative, not juicy. You know what I mean? Like, so they're writing all the stuff that you might be interested in. That's in an appendix. It's called, there's a Chronicle of the Kings of Judah and Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. And if you want to read the juicy bits, go, but this is my message. This is my message. You have to take stuff out. You just can't get down in the weeds like that, because there was probably a lot of juicy bits. I mean, like, if you could get back here, this makes a telenovela blush, right? You know, there's nothing here that is purposeful for him. We just need to, I've made that point over the months that we've been doing this, is that the Torah, the Pentateuch, I don't know what you call it, and the former prophets specifically, are designed to be read together, synthesized together, correlated and organized by the doctrine of the seed, right? So we have the need, the identification of the role of the seed all the way back in Genesis 3. The seed is designed to crush evil, to crush wickedness, Satan personally. And all the way through is the preservation of the seed, all the way through, and the role. And what happens when the seed is not ruling over the people? Are they still God's people when they're not ruled by the Davidic king? Yes, because God strikes Amaziah for declaring war on the northern kingdom. Even the Davidic king cannot bring pain and suffering on even an apostate Israel. And it's very important to our present day, actually, that God does not view them as so apostate that they get bumped out of their unconditional covenant. They still have to be preserved. A remnant of each tribe has to be preserved. And those who bless Israel, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, will be blessed, and those who curse them will be cursed, even if you happen to be this king of Judah, the anointed Davidic king over Judah, right? So none of us have that role, right? We're not that Mormon. If you ever go back to Mormon genealogy, I don't suggest doing this, but my mom did it because she really wanted to be Jewish. You need to understand that all Mormon genealogies, more than 150 years old, take you back, you're all related to David. You're all related to the kingly line of Israel, and you have the right to rule over the Mormon kingdom in the United States. And we're just gonna argue over whether it should be, you know, in Austin or Salt Lake City or wherever, you know what I mean? That's where we're gonna argue at that point. Right, so they have, oddly enough, though, you need to understand this about Islam and Mormonism, is that they are premillennialists. In other words, they share some aspect of our understanding of what the kingdom is. They're replacement theologians who are also premillennialists, which is weird, but they believe that they should rule over a literal kingdom on the earth. And that's what the kingdom prophecy is. Now, they have apostatized so much that it's irrelevant, right? But you have to be wary of people like that. So like Lutherans don't scare me, right? Because Lutherans, when it comes to the kingdom doctrine, right? Because Lutherans are like, oh, it's all spiritual. It's all spiritual. And what they mean is it's all flaky and doesn't really exist. I mean, like, it's just do the best you can and look for Jesus to come back, and that's all you got. Right, but Mormons who believe that they're supposed to rule over this land, or Islam that believes, by the way, they're building mosques all over North Texas. Every time they do that, they think that that's eternal Islamic territory, so this is real. They believe that they are supposed to literally rule everywhere that they place their foot or build a building. Mormons actually believe the same thing. They believe that they are designed to bring a literal, actual political kingdom to the place in which they reside. Which would be fun. We'd give them Utah, right? I mean, like, you can have Utah, you know, or those certain parts of Arizona, like, if they want those, you know what I mean? But they're there, you know, we give them Utah, whatever, but they decided that they could change a little bit in the interest of their eschatology. So now, anyway, you need to be wary of people like that, the same way that Islam should be wary of dispensationalism, right? You may consider the Temple Mount to be your Dome of the Rock Mount, but God doesn't. And you need to understand that ultimately you will be forced off of that real estate, particularly, and it doesn't belong to us, right? Anyway, so you need to be wary. There are no moderate Muslims. That's to say that you don't hate Islam enough. There are Muslims that appear moderate. In other words, there are deceiving Muslims and there are honest Muslims. The honest Muslims are Hamas.
Yep.
Well, I mean, they've been dishonest about the ceasefire, right? But generally speaking, they're honest about their doctrine, their objectives, and their purpose in the land. The Muslims you run into at Albertsons are deceptive. Their doctrine is not different. They simply don't believe that they have a chance, a snowball's chance in Hades right now, of doing what they know they will eventually attempt to do. Right? It's seditious, at least most of the religions of the world are seditious. Anyway, so going back to this, right? You have a legitimate reason to support Israel today. You have a legitimate reason to support Israel's rule of their land today. You have a legitimate reason to despise Islam, who's trying to take it from them, and you probably don't despise Islam as much as you have legitimate reason to. All right. So Uzziah, right, slept with his fathers in the city of David, and Jotham, his son, became king in his place. 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Zechariah, the son of Jeroboam, became king over Israel in Samaria for 6 months. 52 years in Judah, right, for Uzziah, even under leprous conditions. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, as his fathers had done. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin. So it wasn't that God got tired. If you have more than 3 kids, why are the last ones? So we go, well, you're kind of at the tail end, aren't you? Yeah. So you had different parents, right, than Sean did, right? You have different parents. If you have a lot of kids, you end up with different parents, right? Because they get tired, right? So you can't say that Uzziah became a leper, but God was just sick of knocking kings off, right? That he just got tired of discipline because he didn't, right? This guy only lasts 6 months because the evil that he did emulated the sins of Jeroboam the first, Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and he did nothing to counter that. Like Jeroboam the second was blessed, even though he did evil inside the Lord, because he expanded the borders of Israel back to their historic, close to a historic maximum in that region, right? And so it's a moderate record in regards to him, but this guy did nothing good. Then Shallum, the son of Jabesh, conspired against him, struck him before the people, killed him, and reigned in his place. Now we're sounding like, see, that when the people say in the Bible, we want a king like everybody else, this is what you get, right? Unless God intervenes. That's what kings get. Kings get assassinated. Which, by the way, you should understand that millions of people going out to something called a No Kings March is a threat. Historically, that's a threat. against somebody who is ruling disingenuously or not equipped. That's a threat. It's not a peaceful protest, it's strategic. Those people are not peaceful. You can see that they have been organized, strategically accommodated. It's not grassroots at all, but that's a threat. When you stand up and you say, no kings in the United States, when obviously from the very beginning, they offered, did you know that they offered George Washington the title king? And he said, no, because we're not making kings here, right? That was the thing. So when you identify somebody as a king, historically, you're saying that's the person that has a target on his chest. That's the person. So it is not innocuous, it is not legitimate democratic effort, it's not grassroots, it's a threat. And this is how you depose a king, and historically how they did it. The rest of the Acts of Zechariah, for 6 months, behold, it's a short chapter in this juicy book here. Behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. 6 months of his rulership. This is the word of the Lord, which he spoke to Jehu, saying, your sons to the 4th generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. And so it was. Shallum, son of Jabesh, became king in his 39th year of Uzziah, king of Judah. He reigned 1 month in Samaria. You thought Zechariah was bad. You get 30 days, right? He reigned 1 month in Samaria. Then Menahem, son of Gadi, went up from Tirzah and came to Samaria and struck Shallum, son of Jabesh, in Samaria and killed him and became king in his place. Now the rest of the acts of Shallum and his conspiracy, which you may behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. So everybody gets their chapter. Some chapters are short. And Menahem, the rest of acts of Shallum's conspiracy, which you may behold, they are written in the book of Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. Then Menahem struck Tifsah, and all who were in it and its borders from Tirzah, because they did not open to him. Therefore he struck it and ripped up all its women who were with child. Horrible thing, right? Horrible thing. But again, I just want to point out, so when we talk about the curated message of the fallen prophet, we can say that Judah had bad kings. Judah had some kings that didn't do what they were supposed to do. But the record is that when Israel is not ruled by the Davidic king, they really do get a king like everybody else has. This is the kind of drama that goes on in the nations of the world, certainly in the ancient Near East, right? You can read even up to the most modern monarchies before they became constitutional monarchies, right? Almost all of them are. Is it Togo that still has a king, like an absolute ruler? There's some islands in the world that still have, I mean, they're like the size of my family reunion, you know, the whole nation, right? But they have a king. He's a real king. Nobody has a real king anymore. But when you have a real king, there's a lot of drama. Right? You can depose an entire country simply by taking down the king. Angela, did you have something? Oh, you were just clearing the throat. All right. So in the 39th year of Azariah, remember Uzziah, king of Judah, Menahem, son of Gadi, became king over Israel. Reigned 10 years in Samaria. He did evil in the sight of Yahweh. He did not depart all of his days. He didn't even start out good. From the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin. Now why would somebody get to rule for a month or 6 months, and this guy, who sounds just as evil, gets to rule for 10 years? Same justification, same description. He did evil. In fact, he didn't have one good day. Don't you have a bad week when you look back at the last 7 days and you go, that wasn't one of those things that was good. Not one good day that week. Think about 10 years. You look back and every day was evil in the sight of the Lord. That's what happened. He made Israel sin, right? This was bad theologically, religiously for the people of the northern kingdom. But why, after 2 really short tenures, would God do this? Observations?
Stability?
What's that?
Stability?
I think it's,
For the
yeah, it's to preserve the people. The people wouldn't be preserved if they had a wicked ruler that reaped the rewards of their wickedness as rapidly. Does that make sense? Like, these are still the covenant people of Israel. We said that, right? You know, when did you really start praying for Joe Biden to live longer? Anybody? I know when I did. It was when Kamala would have taken over for him. I was like, please let him finish his term. Because we can't handle that. And we couldn't handle another term of oatmeal brain decision making, where we don't know who's using an auto pen. Do we still know? Do we know who used auto pen?
No.
We still don't know. I think, man, people were mad at old Donald Trump for putting up a picture of an auto pen instead of Joe Biden's face. But that was really mild. Really mild. That's a cause for a revolution historically. To find out that you had somebody signing felons away, pardon for people, protecting them from prosecution. Whole countries have been put under for that. But could we have lived? Like, there's a reason, right, that when FDR did he serve 3 terms as president?
Yeah,
Because,
and he was elected the 4th, but he died.
yeah, right. We were saved from that weirdness for another 4 years because he died, right? But that's when they decided, hey, listen, we need to model. This may keep good presidents from serving as long as we would like them to, but it's too dangerous. There aren't that many good presidents, frankly. And we need to make sure that they can limit their tenure, right? But in this case, God expanded the tenure beyond what was rightfully their case for the sake of the people, simply to preserve them so that they could repent and receive their covenant blessings. It wouldn't be wiped off the face of the planet until now, as the writer said earlier. So he does that, right? So Pul, king of Assyria, verse 19, came against the land. I'm sorry, was there a question over here? Anybody? No? Okay, this is really soap opera material at this point in 2 Kings. Came against the land. Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, so that his hand might be with him to strengthen the kingdom under his rule. I want to say that political intrigue, bribery type stuff isn't supposed to be there. How do you keep sovereignty in the land of Israel? You obey God. You put your foot on the land, you obey God, and he gives it to you. You don't have to be paying off your enemies. well, I'm just remembering pallets of cash, right, going off to Iran all those years ago, right? Legitimate governments don't feel the need to do this. Certainly not the kings of Israel. Should not, right? Then Menahem exacted the money from Israel, even from all the mighty men of wealth, from each man 50 shekels of silver to pay the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria returned and did not remain there in their land. This time, right? Eventually they go into exile in Syria, right? Not at this time. Now the rest of the acts of Menahem and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the king of Israel? And Menahem slept with his fathers, and Pekahiah became his. Doesn't that sounds like something from my childhood, doesn't it? You ever watch Pee Wee Herman? Don't admit it if you did. Years ago, I was a rebellious Southern Baptist child, which means we're roughly the same age. We were all there, right? And they would have a genie, Mecca Lecca Hi, Mecca Heiny Ho, come up, right, when I was a kid. My wife was raised as a good Christian Puritan child. She never watched it. Like I said, it was rebellion for me. But Pekahiah sounds like that. Sounds like something Pee Wee Herman would name a king from back in the day. It's hard for me to say with a straight face. 50th year of Azariah. So getting right, 52 years was what Azariah's reign. So this is overlapping near the end of his reign. Pekahiah, son of Menahem, became king over Israel and Samaria and reigned 2 years. He did evil in the sight of Yahweh, did not depart from the sin of Jeroboam, son of Beth, which he made Israel sin. Is God impatient? God impatient? No. He's gracious, man. These people, how many times have we read he did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat? It's like every king.
Yep.
Every freaking king in the northern kingdom of Israel. God is patient. When you read that Abraham's generations would not return for 400 years, why is that? Do you remember this? Because the sin
of the Amorites.
Is not yet complete. In other words, God may have been just striking them down at that moment, but in his grace and mercy, he allowed 400 years of generations of the Amorites to continue, and with opportunity for individuals, I think, to repent, I think we have the same dynamic when Jonah goes to Nineveh, right? You know that the Ninevites were legitimately terrible people. Right? They were legitimately horrible people. And Jonah was legitimately horrified that he was being sent to them because he legitimately was a better theologian than most of us. Legitimately understood God's grace and mercy. And you can ask, well, why did God save the generation that Jonah spoke to when he was going to ultimately destroy that kingdom anyway? Well, because national sovereignty has very little to do with individual opportunity. Right? And there was how many people that didn't know their right hand from their left? In his mercy, he was going to give every individual more chance to evade the consequences of the destruction he was going to bring to their nation. I think the same thing is true here, right? Because when you read the record of the kings of Samaria, the kings of the northern kingdom of Israel, you go, well, there was no hope for anybody. And then you start to sound like Elijah. Pastors of small Bible churches have to fight this all the time. You're like, you're the only one left, right? And what does God say when you tell him something stupid, like, I'm the only one left? He says, I got 7,000 people in my back pocket, dude. So have a snack, take a nap, go back to work.
Yep.
Right? Go back to work. There are people here, right? The ministry of the servants of Yahweh is ongoing in the nation, right? But the national judgment will sweep away the righteous with the wicked if they happen to be in the way. Same sort of thing. We could use the analogy, right? Why did God tell Noah to build an ark instead of just like floating him? Just floating everybody, just move them to the firmament, right? Use the King James, just move them out of the way. Well, the judgment on the world would have swept them away, the righteous with the wicked. So he preserved them that way. And preserved the creation that way. That's just what he does. But a national judgment, global judgment, corporate judgment will sweep away the righteous with the wicked in that case. And so he was patient. He did evil. Then Pekah, the son of Remaliah, his officer, conspired against him, struck him in Samaria and the castle of the king's house with Argob and Arian, and with him were 50 men of the Gileadites, and he killed him and became king in his place. Now the rest of the acts of Pekahiah and all that he did, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. So it's getting really repetitive, isn't it? They did evil, they followed in the way of the sins of the son of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, with which he made Israel sin. Leadership does matter. I'll point out that somebody said, well, who was it? All right, John Kerry, right? John Kerry? No. Who's the Mormon that ran for president?
Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney. Somebody estimated that if Mitt Romney had won that election, there would have been immediately tens of thousands more Mormons in the country if he'd won the election.
Yeah.
And all the conservatives were like, crap, he lost the election. All the Christians should have been like, okay, great. There's not 100,000 more people in the country going to hell because they become the religion of the president, right?
Yeah.
You know, that is, it would have caused a greater sin in the country than it would have resolved. And I think that principle is demonstrated here as well. With Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, right? Leadership matters. The choices that you make, the things that you support matter, right? Most of the time, I just want people to get out of the way of what the church is doing. But freedom of religion is important. I think it's misguided when we apply it to every religion in the whole world. I don't think you can't have freedom of religion with people whose religion tells you that they ought to cut your throat, right? No. I mean, yeah, and I'm including Mormons in there too. We think Mormons are nice people, but read the history of Mormonism. they just like opportunity, to be honest. I know a lot of very, very nice Mormons. I bought a lot of very nice fruits and vegetables from Mormons back in the day. If you don't know where the bishop's closet is, they have lots of survival goods there at discounted prices, because that's part of their religion. They have to have a year's worth of provisions in their house at all times for every family member. Which proves that even pagans have some good ideas sometimes, right? You should probably have some of that yourself. Anyway, 52nd year of Azariah, last year, right? This is the overlap with the leper king of Judah, who's ruling by region at this time, right before Jotham becomes king. Pekah, son of Remaliah, became king over Israel and Samaria and reigned 20 years. He did evil in the sight of Yahweh. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and captured Ijon and Abel Beth-Maachah. Say that 14 times fast, and I'll give you a sticker. And Genoa and Kedesh and Hazor and Gilead and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and he carried them captive to Assyria. Now, observe the dynamic, right? This is an evil king. He's allowed to rule for 20 years, right before these people are first taken captive to Assyria. Why would he do that? God is not standing here on trial. We're not putting him to the test here, right? But politically, theologically, covenantally, what is God doing? What happens when you have a 20-year king? Relative prosperity, stability, peace, right? As a comparison, not that the pastor is a king, but they say pastors don't even get their feet under them until 5 years. The average pastor stays at a church for something less than 3 years, and we wonder why the church is always a mess. Local churches are a mess. That's how it happens, right? Churches don't prosper with rotating, revolving door leadership, either at the elders or pastor level. Either one. God is preserving them with stability, preparing them for going captive into Assyria. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? A lot of people, when they're getting ready to go to war, right? A lot of people don't have kids, period, because they think the world is a mess, right? Why would, that's not God's perspective. But I'm sure that there was a baby boom in those 20 years of stability. That's just what happened in the ancient Near East. You had a stable, peaceful, agricultural nation that was not at war, that had political stability. They did. But why would God do that in the 2 decades right before they go captive to Assyria? This is just the point I'm making about what God does to Israel. Any explanation? You understand, like, why would God give them peace in order to have more babies when they hit 20 years old, they're going to go into captivity in Assyria?
Are you saying that that the captivity happened at the end of Pekah's reign? Because it doesn't make it clear here, I'm confused.
Yeah, no, in those days, in the days.
732 BC
Yeah,
when
right.
this was happening, and they weren't taken captive till 722.
Right. It's not the exile, right? It's not that. It is a partial captivity, though, right? Is it not? I mean, that's what it says. Right, so historically, I'm not saying that it's the whole thing, but why would God increase the population right before he drags a substantial portion of this off to Assyria? What does God do when he's taking the people out of the land? Is it a discipline? Yes, it's a discipline, but what else is it? It's a salvation, right? Because there's judgment coming on this land, and judgment comes on the righteous as well as the wicked. Right? Why does God take Jacob out of the promised land and down to the land of Egypt? Is there some measure of discipline? Well, there's discipline coming, right? The sin of the Amorites is in the promised land. They're experiencing a famine. But he takes them down to Egypt. We think about the last king, the last pharaoh of Egypt, who had forgotten Joseph, who had forgotten all the blessings that came by the way that the Israelites were in their land, all the Hebrews were in their land. But he took them there to build them into a nation, right? And when he takes them around, wandering in the desert for 40 years, what is he doing? He is saving them, right? He's not taking them into another land in vulnerability. He's preparing for them to take the land faithfully. So we need to understand, because a lot of people will point to something like 70 AD. They'll say, look, God is finished with Israel. Well, by the way, that wasn't the first time the temple had been destroyed. The temple had been destroyed previously and been rebuilt and brought people back into the land. But then we have this dispersion, right? There's multiple political dispersions. Rome kicks all the Jews out. Spain kicked all the Jews out. That's why we have crypto-Judaism in El Paso, by the way. We have people that go to Mass on Sunday and celebrate Shabbat on the Sabbath. They light the menorah once a week and go to mass once a week. That happened because of a dispersion from Europe caused by the Inquisition, right? So they came to this region many hundreds of years ago, and rather than having their knuckles snapped off by torture clamps, they decided to go to mass, right? They didn't give up lighting the menorah at the time, but God has preserved remnants throughout the world, yes, as a result of potential judgment, discipline in the big picture, but as preservation of the remnant in the grander scheme, right? And so that's how I view it, right? I'm not trying to suggest that this is the exile, but they definitely did carry them off captive, right? It is an exile for those people that went. It is that. Does that make sense? So we need to understand politically also, I don't know the ratio now. There are lots of people making aliyah, right, to the promised land right now. Lots of Jews, both Messianic and other stripes, non-observant. Some people simply biologically Jewish are making that aliyah, but I believe there's still many more Jews outside the land than in the land, right? And that is functionally, pragmatically, a means of protecting the remnant, I believe, and not simply a matter of discipline. And those two things take place in God's economy, right? And the way God works, not just with Israel, but with us. And that the unpleasant events that we experience are often salvation for us in the physical sense, right? If you have a rebellious child, right? We don't like to think of ourselves as adults as rebellious children, right? If he's in a constant habitual behavior that is destructive, you discipline him, right? You apply painful circumstances to save him from the consequences of his action. And a wise child eventually looks back and says, that was what I needed at the time. You may not notice it, you may not realize it for years, but you look back and say, that actually saved my life. And we need to be able to look at what God is doing in my life, your life, our lives, as the same way, all right? Certainly with Israel as well. All right, so I took my extra 2 minutes that I always take at the end. So we technically have no time for questions, observations, good jokes, or snide remarks. But I'll take them anyway. Anybody? Questions, comments, observations, accusations of heresy, snide remarks? Anybody? We have a lot of people under 25 in here, and y'all have the spiritual gift of snide remarkery. I don't know why y'all are not choosing to exercise it in this room when I hear you exercise it all the time everywhere. But the pastor is asking for them. You ought to be able to lay it on them.
They have a great example too.
That's right. No kidding. Right? Well, yeah. I raised some of them, so that's reasonable. All right, well, let's pray. Father, thank you for this day. We do thank you for your word.